Hi there and welcome to the channel, and in this video I'll share my summer reading plans now that the semester is finally over. I can't tell you how relieved I am at the prospect of not having to rise on Tuesday and Wednesday mornings and bleary-eyed make my way to class. For the next 10 weeks I can read what I wish to read and focus once again on making new videos for the channel. So with that in mind, I've assembled quite a large pile of books which I hope to get through in the next 2 months or so. So without any further ado, let's begin. And first up we have 3 poems, narrative poetry concerning tragic love affairs, the first of which is Alexander Pope's Heloisa to Abelard, and this is based on the famous 12th century romance between Heloisa in her convent and Abelard in his monastery, which they continued via a voluminous correspondence. This is only 360 lines or so long. It forms the appetizer, if you will. The next course is Keats with his Isabella or the Pot of Basil. This is based on one of the tales from Boccaccio's The Decameron, and it's excellent, as you would expect from this magnificent poet. And finally, much longer, it's this novel-length work, Troilus and Cressia by Chaucer, which of course became a play by Shakespeare and is also based on a story by Boccaccio, not from the Decameron. This one is called Il Filostrato, so watch out for that video in the near future. Moving on to novels, which are after all the stock in trade of the channel, the next review will be of Graham Greene's The Power and the Glory, his 1940 novel set in Mexico, in 2 states of Mexico to be specific, Tabasco and Chiapas, and the action takes place during an anti-clerical purge, and we are following the last Catholic priest who is on the run, and he's being hunted down by his nemesis, the lieutenant. This wasn't really that suspenseful in truth, but I imagine a movie adaptation could be quite thrilling. What I found most impressive was the way Greene, despite only spending 5 weeks in Mexico, was able to capture the atmosphere of that country so remarkably well. Its dust, its heat, its topography, its people. I pretty much enjoyed everything about this, and I look forward to sharing my thoughts on it with you. Some more tales of adventure. So next we have this. Erskine Childers celebrated the Riddle of the Sands. I used to see this in the houses that I visited with my parents when I was a child. It would always be up on the shelf, and I used to think it was something to do with ancient Egypt, perhaps the Sphinx, the Riddle of the Sands. However, it's all set in Europe, at sea for the most part, and it's just beautifully written, and you really get the feeling of being out on the water and having all these amazing adventures. Highly recommended. Then finally on the adventure front we have Poe's only novel, the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. Earlier this year I read all of Poe's short fiction, and I made a video about that for the channel recommending the best of it. So it's only natural that I want to read his only novel too. I'm not going to delve into Poe's letters and essays, so that will be all of my Poe reading. I've read the first 50 pages. They are absolutely magnificent. Sorry. Jasmine tea. The first 50 pages feature this drunken voyage with a friend, and they just realise that they're way in over their heads and they almost die. And you'd think it would put Arthur Gordon Pym off going to sea for life, but instead it only whets his appetite for more adventure. Conrad, no less, wrote to Poe to praise his ability to write about being out at sea, so high praise indeed. Then I have some books where I'll introduce writers I particularly admire to the channel. I have actually featured this author before, Robert Louis Stevenson. I recommended his short story The Treasure of Franchard in one of my recommendations videos, but this will be the first sort of book length effort that I've explored for the channel. It is his travelogue, Travels with a Donkey in the Cevennes. Stevenson really loved France, and I just read the opening of this and it just summons up the atmosphere of France 130 or so years ago, and you can just feel Stevenson's love of being there. Wonderful. Next we have Anthony Burgess with his Enderby. I'm not sure how popular Burgess is right now, but he's very popular in the home of the disappointed man. Very Joycean in his linguistic exuberance, but I find him preferable to Joyce. A heresy, I know, but you get all of the love of language without all of that experimentation and bafflement that you'll get reading Ulysses. So I really do enjoy Burgess's writing more, and it's wickedly funny too. I like the illustration on here as well. This book gathers together all the various installments of the Enderby narratives in one handy volume. Then after the adventure, Stevenson and Burgess, I have some more women's writing. This one I don't know much about, Penelope Fitzgerald, Innocence, but she is frequently praised by people I admire and respect, and so I'll give this one a try. If you know anything about it, feel free to enlighten me in the comments. Then an old favourite, Elizabeth Taylor's Mrs. Palfrey at the Claremont, wickedly funny. It concerns a retired lady who takes up residence at a cheap hotel in London and has quite a few adventures there among the inmates. Yes, great writing from Elizabeth Taylor. She's often considered rather middlebrow, but it doesn't matter. These are just excellent reads. Yeah, nothing quite like her. Then Barbara Pym, who Elizabeth Taylor, in my view, is wrongly compared with, or vice versa. Pym really is something quite different, because over the course of her many novels, she constructs this rather large fictional world, so characters will reappear between novels. Sometimes you just catch sight of them in the background, which is rather charming. And there is one problem with her writing. It's extremely Moorish. And so I blasted through all of her novels in a binge, and that had the result of not being able to recall any of them too strongly. I did write some reviews for a Barbara Pym fan page on Facebook. Maybe I can dig out those reviews to refresh my memory. Regardless, I'll give this one another try. It's usually cited as one of her best. Excellent women. And finally, with the female writers for now, it is Jean Rhys's Wide Sargasso Sea. I recently read and enjoyed two of her other novels after leaving Mr. Mackenzie and Voyage in the Dark, so it makes sense to read her classic Wide Sargasso Sea, her rewriting of Jane Eyre. And indeed, this is to women's writing of the 20th century what Jane Eyre was to women's writing of the 19th. It truly is that good. Then a departure, it's some contemporary writing, and this was actually my birthday gift from two of my students last November, and they keep moaning at me, hectoring me, pestering me, chastising me, berating me, because I haven't read it yet. And so I've made a start on it. They say, teacher, you're not very grateful, are you? It's not very polite, is it, to receive a gift, to say you love books, to have a YouTube channel talking about books, but when someone buys you a book for free that you don't have to pay for, it's just for you, you don't read it. So Sean and Kate, I am going to read it before my birthday, because you've promised that I will never get another birthday gift if I don't. And I've read the opening now, and it was extremely dramatic. It begins just as a bombing raid is about to take place on the Channel Island of St. Malo by the Allied forces, I believe on St. Malo, which is being occupied by the Germans. And we are introduced to a blind French girl and a German radio operator, and then the story kind of jumps back and we begin to read about the childhood of the girl and the childhood of the German radio operator. It's full of narrative hooks, and I did feel it was rather commercial, a page turner as I was reading through it, and I felt kind of uncomfortable with some of the attempts at poetic writing, moments of lyricism. They didn't strike me as particularly convincing, but there we go. That's what you get with commercial fiction, isn't it? Moving on, we have some writing from the classical world, in translation naturally. And the first up we have Virgil's Aeneid. It's the John Dryden translation. I'm sure there have been many more in the intervening centuries, but I'm happy to read one by Dryden, a master poet. Next we have Dante. Having read the Decameron, it makes sense to read Dante as well. So here we have all three volumes of Dante's Inferno. It took me 5 years or so to find them all used, but finally the goal was achieved. So hell, I can't see who the picture is by, so never mind, I don't have the glasses, but we'll just go through these. Oh, Purgatory has an excellent picture there, and Paradise, which I'm told is perhaps the most enjoyable volume. Yeah. Okay, then staying with the classical world, or going back further actually to ancient Greece. Sorry, I should have said the Middle Ages for Dante, obviously. Oh dear, you understand. The Iliad, and this translation is by Robert Fitzgerald. I've read some of it before, obviously. And then the Odyssey, which we read part of when I was a school child. And this is also a translation by Robert Fitzgerald. I quite like the artwork on these. Then the series I began for the channel, I will be adding some more installments. Of course, there is the Thomas Bernhard series. So I'll reread, The Rest is Slander, this collection of short pieces. Some of these are exceptional. They are among the very best examples of short writing by Bernhard. So I seriously recommend getting hold of this. You can still pick it up on Amazon and Books for the price it went on retail at. And the other Bernhard novels I wish to get through are The Line Works, one of his deepest, darkest efforts. And I really like the way you can't really be sure of the truth of the murder which is at the centre of this book, because different characters give conflicting accounts. For example, one say it was a murder committed with a shotgun, another says a pistol, another says a sword, one says it was silent, the other says you could hear the screams on the other side of the forest, and so on. And this one is darkly humorous and is full really of madness, appalling madness. Yes, highly recommended. And then one of Bernhard's funniest novels. This one is really biting satire of a group of artists who gather for a dinner party, and it's all of the vicious thoughts that the narrator is having about them as they sit around the dinner table. And the guest of honor also gets roused to a peak of anger and delivers an amazing harangue of one of the people sat at the table, who happens to be an old flame of the author. That moment is magnificent, as she is torn to pieces by this actor who's appearing in a production of Ibsen's The Wild Duck. Yeah, this is brilliant. Then to finish with, we have my passion for French literature, which will once again be engaged. So I will add to the Marguerite Duras series, and the next one will be Summer Rain, which I read earlier this year, and I'll have to reread it in order to do a review, but I did thoroughly enjoy this. The way she introduced these elements of the family life of the central characters was really intriguing. The way you got to know them in pieces, and they were treated in different kinds of units. First you learned about an individual, then the mother and father, then two of the siblings, then the siblings as a whole, then the family as a whole, so each time you were grasping the family dynamics in a fresh way, and it was throwing more light on the quite curious domestic setup which this marginal family had established. So there is that one, and then another Marguerite Duras, the Vice-Consul, and I don't know much about this one, so I can't say anything at all, can I? Apart from the fact that the cover has a rather dreamy atmosphere there. Next, two NYRB classics, the first of which is Novels in Three Lines by the anarchist Felix Feneon, who was the subject of a very famous picture by the pointillist Signac, which Feneon apparently loathed, but I think is a great picture. I did feature it on one of the community posts, and for this book, the background to it is Feneon got a job at a newspaper summarising police reports, that had come in from the courts, and he would turn them into these 3-line reports that would just go inside these little squares in the newspaper. Some 1,100 or so he produced during a year or so of work, and this book is basically collecting them all together. So you can see that en masse they comprise a significant work of art. This is also an amazingly produced book. I do recommend getting hold of it. It's got great pictures. There's one by one of my favourite artists, Felix Vallotton. This one, The Murder. Felix Vallotton did my favourite picture of Jarry, a caricature. Yeah, he's a magnificent artist in his own right. I'll just read you a few of these to give you a flavour of them. The limbs and head of Monsieur Louis Levesque of Aubenas were reduced to ashes by a fire. Only his torso was found. Let's find another one. Through chemical artifice, swindlers have been colouring new 10-centime stamps maroon and then selling them to suckers as rarities. They often hang upon the last word, as you can see. Let's have a couple more. For having refused entry to a labour inspector, the manager of the fair at Marseille has been fined 500 francs. So if you enjoyed Thomas Bernhard's The Voice Imitator, you're pretty much sure to enjoy this. And I should also note it has a quite amazing introduction by Luc Sante, or Lucas Sante as they are known now. Very scholarly, very thorough and enjoyable in its own right. Then we have some Maupassant, one of my passions, and this is his final novel also. New York Review Books Classics, this one from the library, Alien Hearts, which I think is a great title. And I've read the first 2 chapters and they are just beautifully written. What a master he is. So I'm really looking forward to reading all of that. Then I have my French copy of Maupassant's Cruel and Fantastic Tales. I've read about half of them now, so I'll continue. This is my way of basically improving my French and enjoying great literature at the same time. What's become abundantly clear to me from reading the original is that the English translation simply cannot capture the sparkling nature of Maupassant's style. There's just no way in English to come up with such wonderful phrases as you find in the French. However, that's by the by, isn't it? The stories still stand as great stories because of their substance. So I suppose in English we have to put up with losing some of their luster. On that subject, I have 2 collections of his short stories here. I did review a Penguin Classics one, Review 20, which has been a very popular review actually. The stories gathered in this one though, Day in the Country, are not as good as the ones in the selected short stories of Maupassant. There are however 1 or 2 gems in here. I read one this evening and it was The Little Rock Girl. It's a murder mystery and it's absolutely superb. It's some 40 pages or so, one of the longer efforts in here. And this also features On the Water, a very, very spooky tale, which is actually in this one of Cruel and Fantastic Tales. Very atmospheric with a great ending. So the main defect in this collection is that most of the stories are far too short. They're only 5 or 6 pages or so. There is one other I should mention, A Day in the Country, definitely one of Maupassant's funniest stories. It's so earthy and vulgar. It's about this awful Parisian family who go for a day out in the countryside, and it's just side-splitting. Okay, and then this collection, Mademoiselle Fifi. I haven't actually read the stories in here that I haven't read already, if you understand that, but this does feature better stories than this one. So if you go to the library or pick this up as a purchase, better to get the Mademoiselle Fifi one. I'll just tell you the gems that I'm aware of in here. Oh yes, 2 Friends, that is really good. Call It Madness, excellent. A Jewel, very good too. And perhaps the best one in here, The Grove of Olives. I compared that particular story to The Prussian Officer by D.H. Lawrence. That is really a magnificent piece of work. And one more by Maupassant. It's one of his novels, Bellamy. So I don't really know what's in here. I do like the picture on the cover though. So I'll also get through that this summer, hopefully. And to finish, The Weird, The Wonderful, Alfred Jarry, The Exploits and Opinions of Dr. Faustroll, Pataphysician. This is quite miraculous. It's nonsense on one level, but it's internally coherent because because Jarry was absolutely a genius, and he created his own impossible science. If you've read The Third Policeman by Flann O'Brien, this is very much in the same kind of territory. I'll just find a little piece to read to you by way of an example. Let's have a look. Oh, I'll choose this. It doesn't really matter because you'll find magic on every page. With the tip of his boot, the Doctor kicked out at this unexpected development of the elements. An explosion, formidable in its fragmentation and noise, rang out following the projection, all around of new and minute spheres, dry and hard as diamonds, that rolled to and fro all along the green arena, each one drawing along beneath it the image of the tangential point of the universe, distorting it according to the sphere's projection and magnifying its fabulous centre. Beneath everything, the chlorophyll, like a shoal of green fishes, followed its charted currents in the cabbage's subterranean canals. Wonderful writing. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes my summer reading plans. I'd love to hear what your plans are. Equally, you could comment on mine or suggest some other books I might like to read alongside these. Regardless, the time has now come to bid you farewell in the customary fashion. So, until the next time, be safe, be strong, nanu nanu.